is Colin Mockery, and you're listening to Dispatch Radio.
Sure. Folks, you've already heard me previewing this great new series that's coming up on WGN. It is Manhattan, based on the Manhattan Project, and we have one of the stars of the show with us. We're going to talk about that and preview a little bit about what you need to expect, because this breaks here in a week or so on July 27th, and you definitely don't want to miss the show. I've enjoyed what I've seen so far. Ashley Zukerman, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, and love your character. It is such a great, unique role of the sort of, I guess the best way to say this is, you know, on many shows, your character is this smarmy genius that everybody ends up loving to hate, but your character has such a conscience about him. I don't think that's what fans are going to see. So tell us a little bit about Charles and what he's like.
I think you're right. I think he, at the beginning of the show, at least, he's the point of view character. He's the character that you get introduced to Los Alamos, or our Los Alamos, with, and the discovery that what his genius is being put towards is the creation of the most horrific weapon ever invented. That's how we meet Charlie Isaacs. And then as he develops and as the show develops, we actually see that he's a much more complicated character than even that, and much more complicated than the situation. Ultimately, it's a show about deeply, deeply flawed people trying to do the best they can in a terrible, ridiculous environment. That's the show, I guess. I don't know how well that sells it, but I'm sure it's fun to watch while all the characters do their best.
Well, we've been able to screen the first 2 episodes, and I just really love it. And one of the things I like about it, and I want you to speak to this, is, you know, you immediately want to, race to the internet and start verifying some facts and different things. Now, it's not a historical show, but did you come away with that a little bit when you first read the script? Like you were just kind of blown away because the topic really hasn't been explored.
Yeah, that's right. While I don't think it's going to be part of the iconography of what Los Alamos or the Manhattan Project in 1943 was like, in 50 years' time, people won't look at this for an exact idea of the events that took place. I think it'll give you an idea of what it was like back then. Definitely the emotional experience of what it would have been like to work on this thing under extreme secrecy in the way that it was. But more than that, it'll, I guess, in the same way that other shows teach you about, when The Sopranos, you walk away understanding what it must be like, life must be like for these gangs in New Jersey, or Mad Men teaches you, people know more about advertising than they have ever had in the history of society because of that show. But yet those aren't the events that took place. I guess we're in this golden age of television where we're exploring really interesting times. Our show is another level of that, I think.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it really starts to deal with, we could easily make this a pretty dramatic or boring History Channel sort of approach to things, but this is really dealing with, the town and the human interactions. And one of the things that you touch on, but I want you to dive a little deeper, is the secrecy, right? I mean, Charlie's whole life is not exactly what he thought. It's even more complicated than he thought. Of course, his wife's not even particularly thrilled about this either, because the show really dives into the amount of self-sacrifice from this standpoint. We always talk about self-sacrifice from the soldier standpoint, especially during World War II, but not necessarily the folks that were moving technology down the ball field.
I think that's right, and I'm glad that you've picked up on that it's not, that it's a whole different kind of sacrifice, because ultimately these are civilians that didn't ask for this. These aren't people who were conscripted or asked to go to war or joined up that made the decision to fight. These are civilians and who were tasked with creating a weapon and to fight. So knowing that, then the show explores what secrecy and ultimately the ugly sister of secrecy, which is lying or lies, what that does to a relationship, what it does to the individual, to a relationship, to a society. So as you said, when my character finds out what it is he's working on and comes home, the first thing he can't do is tell his best friend, the person he shared the last 6 years of his life with, the love of his life, what it is he's making, and he can't share that with them, and it automatically starts a rift between them, which is what secrecy and lies do. We all, I think that's a very easy thing to identify with, even if you're not making an atomic bomb. We know what keeping a secret can do in a relationship. And then the show then explores what happens when that secret is inherent in the building of society, which is Los Alamos and then the United States.
Well, and I think that it's just such an interesting topic to explore, because I think the secrecy element that is here has been glorified in any other shows or genres, especially like the spy thrillers of old. The secret's okay. Everybody's okay with the secret. You go ahead and they'll lie to their spouse and be a spy during the daytime. True Lies did that with Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? It's all glorified. Yeah. But here you start to get a real dose of, hey, your marriage may not survive this. You may start drinking. You have all sorts of issues. And by the way, she can't leave you. So it is such a fascinating element and dynamic that, even though it's not historical, it is historical because this is what people went through.
That's right. That's exactly it, and that's what we hope people will take away from that. That's beautiful. I hadn't actually thought about that in the past, that secrecy has been glorified, and that's maybe why it's so easy for us to accept that, we talk a lot about how this is a 2014 show, not a 1943 show. And so it's interesting that you say that by glorifying spies like we have, in a sense of patriotism, in a way we're allowing the government to do what it's doing with, monitoring us, and we're prepared to give up our liberties in exchange for, for better national security. And that's largely to do with the fact that we think it's, in the long run, worthwhile. And I guess, hopefully, what we get to explore, at least, I don't think this show is didactic at all, but what we get to explore, at least, is how valid that claim is.
This show, unlike many others, has been very blessed because it was picked up as a whole, right? The whole season was picked up. And
right.
Is that so much more comforting as an actor and as a performer to know, listen, I don't have to worry about getting to episode 8. That's the end of the contract, or they get a rush ending and they got to move on? Or, is there certain, does it change at least sort of the relaxed nature of everything? Does it allow for a different creative atmosphere to work?
That's interesting. I guess there are good sides and bad sides to it. I think the traditional model, which I've never done, but typically you're speaking to the point that usually a show shoots a pilot and then a couple of months later the show gets picked up and then you get to shoot the series, if it gets picked up. And I suppose the benefit of that would be that you get to try some things out, explore the character, and then just meditate on it for a couple of months and understand so much more in that time. And then when you come back, you can come back in with more strength. The benefit of what we get to do is the fact that we can trust that there's an entire story ahead of us, so that we can afford to not show everything in one scene, that we can really, really commit to the simplicity and grace of the writing and just show that. That's, I guess, the main benefit and the beauty of going straight to series.
Fantastic. And if you would, can you contrast the approach, and I think I know a little bit of the answer here, compared to when you worked on a show like Terra Nova, which, at least on the surface appears to have a much faster production pace and obviously there's so much more, special effects and all these different moving parts. To do a more character, such a stronger character, that's the best way to say it, because I'm not trying to sell Terra Nova short, big fan. But trying to say, compared to the character-driven only sort of drama.
It's so interesting. In terms of the time that we shoot it, it's actually the same. And I was brought onto Terra Nova halfway through the series and as a guest. And on this, I get to meet it at a grassroots, and that's inherently such a beautiful opportunity and such a different experience. Other than that, though, I think what we'd probably start doing is comparing shows, and that's, I guess, Terra Nova and this show are it's apples and oranges. Terra Nova was a whole lot of fun to shoot, and this is a really complicated as you said, character-driven piece. They're almost two jobs. There's probably Terranova, there's Manhattan, and then there's being an accountant, and they're all probably equally similar and dissimilar.
Fair enough. And let me ask the last question about Charlie's character. So, do you have those moments, or have you had that moment you'd share with this where you've got a line of dialogue, or you've got something where you're like, it's so science heavy that you're like, I have no idea what we're talking about here. You gotta actually go. You gotta go to the consultant and go. Actually, feel like, hey, I want to make sure I don't look stupid here. What am I actually even talking about?
It's so interesting. When I got the show, the first thing I did was I just bought a whole lot of physics books, and obviously rudimentary level, and I just started studying. And then very quickly a script started coming in, and I had to speak about pretty much the end point of knowledge at this point in time, and theory at this point in time. And I was still working on the basic stuff. It actually made it harder for me to do it because I knew how little I knew. So it made it, I guess, harder to play a genius because I knew how much I didn't understand about what I was saying. So I guess what we've tried to do most of the time is understand it as much as we can, which I guess the basic theories are actually not incredibly difficult to understand. The math's impossible at my level, but like in terms of theories, it's about just getting your head around them. They're okay, and they can be explained by the incredible advisors that we're blessed to have. That they can be explained very, very simply. But then our task is more to understand the actual emotional journey of the scene. That's what people will come away from. And it's so important for them to understand what we're building. And like we said before, I think people will actually understand the science of this thing by the end of the first season.
Fantastic.
Even if not intricately.
Ashley Zukerman's giving us a little heads up here on WGN's new show, Manhattan, which starts July 27th at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Ashley, before we let you go, is there any other cool projects coming down the way, or are you actually just taking a break from production?
This will be it for a little while. I'll take a break and second season at some point. I'll brush up on my physics before then, get a little more confident.
Charlie probably takes a little bit out of you from an intellectual standpoint, right?
Oh, yeah, but more just from an emotional standpoint. That's why the writing is so fantastic that every scene, every episode requires me to just reimagine who Charlie is. And so that's the tiring element. But beautiful.
It's fantastic. And like I said, I've only been able to see the first 2 episodes, folks, but you don't want to miss this. You definitely want to jump on board right away and test the water for yourself. And as I've said before, as I previewed them, you want to watch the first 2 episodes. Do not give up on the show after the first episode because you think it may be a little bit slow or a little bit. No, the 2 episodes go together. It's like a package. It's like a big giant premiere, in my opinion. You got to watch the whole thing, and then you'll be hooked. I promise. So, Manhattan, July 27th, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Ashley Zukerman, thank you again for fitting this into your schedule, my friend.
Oh, Brandon, thanks so much for having us. And thanks
I look forward to catching up with you again as we hear about a great Season 2 renewal, because that's what I anticipate. And we'll get a chance to talk again then.
Great. Thanks, man. Thanks very much.
All right, bye-bye.